Meeting is being recorded. So we've done the roll call. There are no adjustments to the agenda other than I would like to have our guest speak first. And our guest is Peggy Schaefer from the Connect Maine Authority. Daryl has set this meeting up today, and we want to talk about obviously broadband and what funding may be available to us under the American Rescue Plan or other sources. So by way of a little bit of background, Peggy, Rangeley, and the three other plantations have embarked upon a joint venture to secure broadband for the community. We do have a couple of RFPs on the table. We also are pursuing an interlocal agreement. So there's some town meeting warrant articles out there. One town has voted to enter into discussions. The other ones will vote within the month or shortly thereafter to do the same, hopefully. So that's kind of the background and why we've invited you here today to speak with us. So without any further ado, Peggy Schaefer from Connect Maine.
Hi, can I share my screen?
I will allow you to do that. Yep. Hang on just a second. Okay, try that.
Here we go.
Okay. So now the problem with sharing the screen is that I lose all of you. I see none of you. So I'll just keep going if you have questions. My name is Peggy Schaefer. I'm the director of the Connect Maine Authority. We are the state broadband authority that provides grants and support to communities and providers to bring service to unserved areas of the state of Maine. Our purpose really in statute is to make sure everybody has a broadband connection and can use it. So that involves not only the wire running by your house, but it involves the ability to connect to that wire, affordability, and the understanding of how to use the service and potentially devices. So all of those sort of fit underneath our statutory requirements. We traditionally have two grant programs. We have a community planning grant, which helps communities plan about how to expand broadband. And we have an infrastructure program, which supports actual building of connectivity. So recently there has been two things passed by the federal government that it can potentially impact broadband. One of them is the American Rescue Plan, and the other one is the COVID relief plan that was passed in December. So, but we will start with the American Rescue Plan because that is the biggest. I'm going to be talking specifically about three sections of funding. They are the local funds, which is in section 602 of the bill, county funds, which are 603, a capital project fund, which is 604, and then general state funding. So the 604 and state funds, this is the 604 money is the capital projects fund. This fund, the language is very vague. It talks about capital projects to carry out capital projects that directly enable work, education, and health monitoring, including remote options. The way Treasury is looking at this language is that it is all of those things at the same time. And why this happened this way is because the bill was passed under reconciliation, which means that when the Senate added this piece, section 604, they couldn't be more specific about what was in there because of the way the process works. So they stuck in this language and a formula that details out how the money is, how this $10 billion is split. It means roughly $129 million for Maine. The problem, so to speak, or the opportunity yet is that Treasury has not yet issued guidance specifically about how this fund is going to be used. So we don't know, we can guess based on what they've already issued in interim rules that it probably will continue to prioritize unserved areas, that's areas under 25.3. It may not allow you to fund areas that have already received or will receive federal funding, which includes the FCC Rural Digital Opportunity Fund or RDOF auction that just happened. And so we will learn that when they finish the guidance. The timeline for this, we expect that there will be potentially an application process for the state, one application process for the state that is probably in July. There is, thank goodness, no time frame on the end of when we can expand these funds by. So some of the COVID relief money, if you remember last year's COVID relief money, had to be spent by the December 31st. This fund in statute specifically says until expended. So there is no end deadline. That's good. The state funding is the broad state funding. I think it's about 1.2 billion the state is getting. And the governor has put together a very wide-ranging plan to address the impact of COVID. It includes some labor money, it includes some tourism money, it includes a whole variety of activity of things. That plan is going before the legislature for approval. In that plan is $21 million for broadband. And all of this stuff, again, has to address the impacts as a result of COVID. So 602 and 603 funding is town and county funding. The interim rules were just released, I think it was last week. And areas that are eligible are areas that do not have reliable service at 25/3. There is a preference for community-based solutions, in other words, public ownership. And the federal guidance sets a floor for what's allowed, but allows local implementation, including affordability criteria. Now, these 602 and 603 funds have more uses than just broadband. I am going to focus on broadband because that's all I care about, but there are other uses for these funds, including water and sewer and a whole variety of other things that can alleviate some of the impacts of the COVID virus. So it's important when you look through the regulations, which are about 140 pages long, to really understand how this money can be used so you can make sort of the best choice for your community. I would argue, of course, that it's broadband, but that's my job. So when we look at how it's a formula based, and when we look at how much money is allocated for each town in this area, Rangeley should get about 120,000. Rangeley Plantation about 20,000, Sandy River about 10, and Dallas Plantation around 30. The entire Franklin County gets an additional $5.8 million. So it's not an insignificant amount of money, but there is, like I said, competition for this. At the county level, those decisions about how it's going to be spent will be made by the county commissioners. Town money is going to flow through the state, but there is no, that I've been able to figure out, application thing, anything that says that the state can oversee how the towns are going to use the money. My only caution there is that if the state is not responsible really for making sure you're using it correctly, the feds are. And so read the rules carefully and make sure you know what you're doing, because you don't really want the feds coming in 3, 5, 6 years from now and doing an audit and asking for the money back. So just the language is pretty loose, but just be careful about making sure you're dotting all your I's on that. So here's how the money that can be used for broadband. This is the Treasury interpretation and the page number of the thing. They are interpreting the cost. This is important. The costs have to be obligated by December 30th, 2024, but do not have to be expended by then. I believe the rules say they can be expended by December 31st, 2026. So you do have time, right? There's no, I know everybody feels like this money's coming down, I got to spend it next week. You don't. You really do have time to think about this and plan it and do it right. The technology capacities, the preference is for projects that deliver 100 over 100 symmetrical. And there is allowed to be 100 over 20 in areas where there is excessive costs per household. And there's no definition of what that means. It's just, so if you're gonna not be able to do symmetrical because of cost, it's really important to be able to drive fiber as deep as you can into the system, because it's important that these investments are scalable. In other words, if you can only deliver 100 over 20 now, there has to be a way in this project for you to scale up to faster speeds as demand increases. So it does encourage and prioritize investments in fiber optic. You expect it on focusing on areas that are unserved or underserved, and there's flexibility to identify specific locations. In other words, they say reliable 25 over 3. They do not say you have to use the FCC 477 data. So that is sort of an open question about the data and what will be accepted as appropriate data. But the fact that they didn't say, the fact that they said reliable, and the fact that they didn't say you have to use the 477 data from the FCC, which are those FCC maps, which we all know are not that accurate, is really important, because that means there's a little flexibility about determining who is underserved. They are encouraging not to overlap with existing programs, specifically the USDA programs, which you don't have, and the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. Now, it's important to remember with the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, those funds don't start flowing through the people who bid on those until 2022, and they have a 6-year build out. So that's that process there. So the other thing it does allow for is to consider affordability in your expenditures. In other words, how are you going to make sure that people, once you build this network, the people in your area can use it? So some towns have set up affordability funds. And so that can be one of the considerations of how you use this funding. The other piece that came out, this is the December piece that came out, is was a program through NTIA, which is in the Department of Commerce, for an infrastructure fund. It's $288 million nationally, which sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. It's very little money, actually. They are looking for big size projects. They're looking for projects that are ranged between $5 and $30 million. And it is, again, the priorities for the funding, to provide funding for the greatest number of households in an eligible area, service for rural areas, cost effective in providing broadband, and provide service with a minimum download of 10 and minimum upload 20. So to be eligible for this fund, the applicant has to be a public instrumentality of the state. It has to be a state or a political subdivision of the state and a provider, but the provider cannot be the lead applicant. It either has to be a community or it has to be the state. There is no match requirement for this money, but because it's very competitive, if you have match money, that will help. The chances are you're not going to be able to use the ARA money, the American Rescue Plan money, as a match, because feds don't like it when you use their money to match their money. You have to have, the locations has to be at least, it is by census block that they want you to define your proposed service area. And at least one location in the census block can't be served at 25.3. So that's actually a flip of the way the FCC defines it. So, and again, no previous state or federal funding for wired broadband service. It has to be scalable. In other words, looking out in the future, you need to be able to scale it up. And the requirements are you have to build within a year. There are exceptions for that you can apply for after you don't build within a year, but they do want it built out within a year. The deadline for this is July 17th, I believe. State funding. We had, we've just finished up our first round of funding with the bond issues that was passed last year. Those announcements will be made at our board meeting, which is tomorrow. Yes, Wednesday. Our second round of bond funding will be the remainder of the fund, which is about $7.5 million. Likely September opening for that round. So it's important to get sort of your plans ready to go if you want to be a part of that. And match really matters in our program. It really matters. When we look through who scored well in this program and who didn't, match was a significant driver of that. So just remember that match really does matter. And you can use the federal funds to match our funds for this program. The yet unknown is the American Jobs Plan, or better known as the Infrastructure Plan, and really everything is unknown about that. We don't know how much they're going to put in it. We don't know how they're going to distribute it, and we don't know what the requirements are going to be on that. So there's several bills floating around Congress. Some of them send the money to the FCC, which in my opinion is a huge mistake. Some of it sends it to the state, some of it splits it. All of that is yet to be determined. So that's a stay tuned. So the other piece that's out there is right now is the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. This is a $3.4 billion fund that the FCC set up. This is to help people pay for broadband internet. You can apply online, which is very ironic, right? People can't afford the internet, but you have to go online to apply. And the program runs through providers. So if you go online to apply, you can also download, which is also, again, ironic. You can download the application and mail it in. And you have to go through, there's a whole host of programs that you can be qualified for to be qualified for this program. Free and reduced lunch is a big one. And there's a whole bunch of other ones. You have to use they have to go through what's called the National Verifier Program, which is the FCC runs, which verifies somebody's eligibility, and then the provider will come out and provide you service. This benefit is only good until the money runs out. And the maximum benefit is $50 a month. We know that some providers are providing less of a benefit. So AT&T has a $5 a month plan. Verizon is trying to upsell people to a $90 a month plan, of which this will take care of $50 of it. So it's really sort of a buyer beware piece out there. There are many broadband providers in the state of Maine who are using this program and with the best intentions and trying to make sure that people get connected to it at the $50 a month piece. So, but it is a piece that's happening right now that people can sign up for. As you know, you guys have been part of this greater Franklin County process, which is a countywide plan, has multiple options. I know you guys have been working on this for a while. The intent of this plan and all of our plans that we encourage communities to do is to attract investment, right? So you need to attract, you're trying to attract investment from private sources and ISP, maybe investors, state and federal money. And you want this for us all to invest the money in your community. So it's really important when you do this that you also have a financial commitment and a part of your community. If you think about, you're asking people to invest in your community, if you're not willing to make that investment yourself, it makes the rest of us sort of question that investment. It's really important to understand your options, right? So I know you have 2 RFPs out, and I've seen that CCI has come and presented their strategy, which they have used successfully in Chester, New Hampshire. They're also working on a project in Long Island, which is, it's an island. And I think they're working with the town of Eastbrook. So they are looking at this in multiple places. It is an option where it is not tax revenue. It is user fees that help pay off the town's portion. of the infrastructure. And when it's done, the town can own, if they choose to, Long Island's going to choose to own that infrastructure. So that's a very viable option for you. It's important to understand what the risks are for you. We've had a number of communities talk to us. Charter Communications is talking about they call it a bulk purchase plan, where they bill the town for every location they pass at $30 a month, and the town is obligated to pay that and then bill the consumer. It does provide you an affordable plan, but it's really important. We've had a number of long conversations with the town to really understand what the risk of that is, because on the surface, it looks like a very good potential, because the charter will expand in your community to serve unserved locations, but the town is on the hook for billing for it. And that can be bad and good. It's just important to understand the risk of all of these opportunities. And then this is one of my pet things, right? We are trying to build networks. We're not trying to build town facilities. These are networks. They have to be connected to each other. And the scalable way to do this is for communities to come together to build these. In some places, and your area is a perfect example of it, you've got a density of some sort in Rangeley, but not density outward. And if you don't come in together, it's going to be much more expensive for those plantations to come in, and B, it's going to be harder for them to get service. So it's really important to think about this not as a town by town basis, but as a regional basis. You're wanting to make sure everyone in your region shares with the opportunity. And the final piece really is timing. Some of our money has we have another application probably opening in September. The American Rescue Plan does have sort of a long tail, but it does allow you to get a plan in place. But there's going to be a lot of demand for ISPs to do this work. As money flows in to states and localities, there's going to be increasing demand for a pretty limited workforce to get this work done. And also there's some concern nationally about the availability of equipment, fiber, electronics, all of that stuff. And there is a significant amount of money right now flowing into broadband nationwide. And so there is a timing risk there that you really should think about as you're moving forward. Don't take forever to make these decisions. So that's it. I can figure out how to end. Am I done? Yes. I'm not still sharing my slideshow, am I?
You still are.
Okay. Oops, now you're completely gone. There we go. All right. There was a little button that said stop sharing.
So thank you, Peggy. It's a time for questions. I'll start.
Yeah, happy to take questions.
I'll start with Kate.
I don't even know where to begin. I was thinking of a couple of the areas that you talked about in regards to the project that we're working on. One of which was the end user, having a bucket full of money to help pay the end user fee charge. Where we're at now, we've actually met a few of the requirements that you've already been discussing. So we're working on an agreement to have an interlocal agreement between the 4 areas. The consolidated approach is the recommended approach after the RFP, and we're looking at going towards a bond application for that. The question I had was, on the funding of the bond, I missed a piece of your presentation. Is there help with bonding? You said there was a September timeframe for the state bonding that's not going to like one municipality, because we're going to go as a community instead of just the town of Rangeley.
So I think that we're using bonds in different ways.
Okay.
Our funding for this round that we're in now, and for the September round, is from a general obligation bond that was voted by the state last July.
Okay.
You're talking about a revenue bond which is a bond that you would put, that's to be paid off by the revenue generated by the project. Even though they both say bond, they're completely different pools of cash. Our money can be used to lower the cost or to offset the cost of a revenue bond. So instead of borrowing, if the project's $3 million, instead of borrowing $3 million and passing that on to through an end user fee, you might borrow, like let's make an easy number because I'm not good with math, $2 million and get $1 million from us, and therefore you reduce the cost to the end user. In other words, you reduce the size of what you're borrowing, and so therefore the user fee that Consolidated talks about is therefore smaller.
Okay.
And we actually had 2 projects come in this past round, this round that we're working on now, that were consolidated projects that did just that. They said, without this money, the end user will pay X. With this money, they'll pay Y. So
That's great. And the NTIA, that's the nation, countrywide, right? So you said there were $5 to $30 million projects. So
yep.
Our project is about 5.5 million, I think 6, close to that for all the regions. But you said it's very competitive. If we're ready to go now, is that an asset to us to get that money? And is that money available now?
The money will be available in November.
Okay.
That's when they're going to make the decision. These rules just came out last week.
Okay.
And I have talked about, so one of the things that the rules say is, because there's only a 1 award per state, that's in law, is that, and there's a strong preference in there for the states to review and to some extent pre-select applications. So one of the things that I have thought about was that we might put in a state application that, I don't know how we do this. I don't know how we pick projects, but we might put in a state application that is in fact the application for the state that covers a number of projects and would be in the $5 to $30 million range. I mean, I think that these projects are a lot of work, and though this NTIA money is a whole lot easier than USDA money, it nevertheless, it might be a good idea for us to put in one application for the state. But that's my idea. I've run it by a couple people and they've all said, well, that's interesting. So we'll see, we have to see how that goes going forward. I think the selection process of who we pick and how we do that is an open question.
Thank you very much.
Also,
Also for me.
Hi, Peggy. I have 2 questions. They're a little disparate. One of our recurring questions is, if we move forward, make application for bonds at the next date in August, and grant monies become available, say, within the next year, but we have our bond in place, conduit bond, we go with CCI. Can we apply for a grant to, say, establish an affordability fund if we are all set on our financing, so to speak?
Yes and no. So our problem with our funding right now is that it is all, because it's a general obligation bond, it has to be infrastructure. That's the taxation rules on it. It has to be infrastructure. There is absolutely a possibility with some of the American Rescue Plan money, either the money that's coming to you or potentially the money that's coming to the state, that some of that might be able to be used for affordability. Our law, our statute says that our applications have to they have to not be able to be funded they have to not be able to go if our money has to be sort of a key piece of the project working. So we've been pretty loose on that conversation so far, but we've not had somebody come in and say, we already bonded for it, we want you to. But I think if you can, I mean, the two CCI projects that came in have not bonded yet, but they specifically said, you know, we're going to do this anyways. But we just need, this helps us make it more affordable to end users. And so that might be an argument that works.
Okay. My second question is in relation to your recent request for public comment in looking at the parameters for what constitutes underserved and moving it up to, I think it's 150 of 50, 10, 100 over 100. And I believe you're voting on that tomorrow. How does that affect the eligibility, say, of our area in qualifying as underserved? We are served, we are not happy with what we have. We have roads that have no service. We may have some folks who have adequate service or actually good service. We're kind of all over the place. So when we look at the parameters, we're just not sure where we fit. And when we look at the upcoming decision, how do you foresee that affecting the underserved communities?
So, unfortunately, we can't vote on the timing. We can't vote on the final adoption of this thing tomorrow because it's only been 29 days. It has to be 30. But we will do it soon. Soon as, you know, anyways, what that will mean is for state funds, this does not affect the federal funds, right? Because I don't have any control over those people, but for state funds, a project will be unserved if the recipients can't get a service of 50 over 10. So if they can't get 10 up and they can't get 50 down, they're unserved. Underserved in our world is a matter of a geographical definition. So 20% of your project can have a service of over 50/10 and still be qualified as being part of the project. So if you have 100 locations that you're hitting and 80 of them or 85 of them are under 50 over 10 and 15 of them are over 50 over 10, that whole project area still qualifies.
Okay, so say this were adopted at your next monthly meeting. And
Might do it sooner, but not tomorrow. It's on 29. We counted it on the calendar and it was like, are you kidding me?
then your next round of grant applications would come in the fall,
Yes,
September-ish?
Yes.
You're pretty quick to move on those from what
I know. We have this whole piece about get the money out fast, take your time, which is a very, it's the Dr. Doolittle thing, right? The push me, pull you. And it is, we've been, right now we're saying September. It's not going to be before then because we have to do a couple things, one of which our rule requires that we declare areas unserved. And so this year was the first time we'd actually ever done that. And so it's a process where towns and communities or providers come in with an area they think they want to serve. They would think they want to provide ask for funding for. And they come in and show us evidence, either from our map or from speed testing or from the community plan, about that the area is unserved. We post those requests for 30 days. Providers have an opportunity to come in and say, I serve that area, here's my evidence. And then at the end of 30 days, the board declares it as that, all of those areas that people have said, this is unserved, this is going to be my project area, it's unserved. The board then declares those areas as unserved. being done, they're unserved. And then they can be part of a grant application. So there's a 60-day window on that. It's in rules, so that's how we have to work it. So September's really the earliest we could do this. Because if you think we open up this 60-day window, I don't know, in July, it's 30 days, you know, so September would absolutely be the earliest we could do this.
Okay. Does that make sense?
But means it's too late for us.
It's too late for us.
Unless you go with option B. Or unless we have some sort of commitment that it could be for the end user to be.
That's a different fund.
Right, but
Yeah,
they're all
very much.
later.
But that's not the point, it's not 100% covered, that's the problem. But it would be then going back to the public and asking for money, taxpayer money.
And this might not be a question for Peggy, and maybe it's inappropriate at this time, but so our deadline is August to apply for the bonds. Let's say we go and apply for a bond and we find out in November, whenever it is that we've got this bond. Or then we apply for some funds, one of these funds. Can we use it to pay off our bond early?
No, not with the bonds that are applying for. You can't, because they sell the municipal bonds, so there has to be a guaranteed return over a guaranteed term. It's not private funding.
Good question.
So, I mean, the other thing, how Callis and Baileyville did this is they went to banks and they got a 2% loan under the Community Reinvestment Act. So the bank gave them a very low interest loan, but it's the same idea as this revenue bond. The revenue from the project pays off that bond. Now, the one thing that they did do, those towns did do, was the towns essentially they didn't put money aside, but they said they would, if the project doesn't meet its benchmark goals, to pay off the loan or pay off, that the towns would pay that off. Now, that's not all of it. So the towns each, I think, said, yes, we would pay up to whatever it was, $1.2 million each. But those payments are not in $1.2 million chunks. They're like in annual or monthly chunks. So if the project doesn't meet its annual take rate or its annual revenue stream, then the towns back that up. But it's not for the whole 1.2 million. It's for a significant portion less than that, because it's, so let's say they needed a take rate of 30% and they only got 25%. That 5% that they didn't get on that take rate, the revenue from that is what the towns then would owe. So it is a much lower risk in terms of the towns paying that off, because it's not everything, it's just what revenue was not generated by the project. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Consolidated has no take rate from what we would propose.
Right.
So now internally, if we were
Right.
going for a loan
And
versus a bond.
I think Baileyville Calais also owns and operates.
Right. Is
Okay.
there a reason why we couldn't use a bank loan?
It doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, I think we can probably dive into that a little later on. I want to direct any questions while Peggy's with us. So
And Joanne,
that's where I was going.
I just wanted to ask if we could get a copy of the PowerPoint.
You can, maybe. Yes, I'll send it to Daryl.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions, Joanne, of Peggy? Okay, Steve Bilbrick, any questions for Peggy Schaefer?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Carrie Keep, any questions for Peggy? I'll give you a minute to unmute, sir. Yep, he's still in there. Carrie Keep, can you hear us? Do you have any questions?
Take his phone.
Rebecca, while we wait for
Yeah,
Mr.
I can hear you.
Okay,
Did you say he was all set?
he just said he can hear us.
Do you have any questions, Carrie?
I got in late, but I guess my question would be, are we gonna lose out on grant money by starting this too early, or are we gonna lose out grant money by starting it too late, or how's the timing go?
Yeah, those are things you have to look at. I think the bond bank does one round in the summer maybe, and then another round in the fall. And so that may be something you look at in terms of which is the more advantageous for you to be part of. I will say, so this round of funding that we had, right, that we are in the process of potentially making decisions on tomorrow, we put out about $7.5 million. We had almost $14 million in requests, and we know that the next round is going to be more competitive than that. So don't. I wish I could say I could help. I wish I had a huge bank account. I could just write you all checks. I do not. I have a bigger bank account than I used to, but I do not have a big bank account. The federal money that's coming to us, I don't want to promise that to anyone because I have no idea what requirements the feds are going to put on that. So it's not, I mean, it's out there, it's a potential. I have some fantasies about it, but until the feds come out with the rules, the NTIA money, when that first happened in December, all of us state broadband leaders thought those were going to be grants to the state. We thought they were going to be, here is some amount of money, formula-based, that goes to your state that you can use to augment your state program. That is not how NTIA did it. They opened it up for a national application. So that didn't happen like we envisioned. I am hopeful the Treasury money is a little less disappointing than the NTIA money was.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. Carrie Keefe, do you have any other questions?
Well, I just have a concern that without a grant to help on the cost of the installation of equipment and whatnot, or the equipment itself, whatever, that if I'm afraid that if this competition gets in on this and we don't get enough participants and we have to cover that bond by user fees, I'm afraid it might not be affordable.
Broadband envy is a real thing. When people get good broadband, everybody wants better broadband. So projects that have done pretty well with their take rates. And so that's really important to look at. And that has to really be part of your plan, is how you're going to push this out. You need to make sure people understand the service is there and that they can use it, right? So that's really important. Some of the early municipal projects nationwide didn't do well because they just thought people would take the service, and it turned out they really needed a marketing budget. So don't forget that piece. It's not, if we build it, they will come. You really need to attract people to use it. And also, the town at the 602 money, the American Rescue Plan money that's coming to your area, specifically for your area, is about $180,000. That's not a small chunk of change. I don't know the process that the Franklin County people are going to use for their $5.8 million, but you certainly should be there making a case with them to have some of that money come to your area to bring broadband to your area. I mean, you can make an economic case for this very easily. You guys have already had some significant investment in the area. Without broadband, that doesn't mean anything. That investment is, if you think about what has happened at Sugarloaf in the last, 20 years, more than that, with their housing, and that is going to happen in Saddleback too. And that housing demand has the huge potential of bringing in customers that you don't even know about yet. How ski areas make a lot of money is they sell land, or they rent land, or they build condos, and all those people want fast internet. So there's a potential group of people there who are not yet in your community who could be a huge piece of how this project pays for itself.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Carrie?
No, not right at this time. I guess I need more information at some point.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, did you have any questions?
I don't have any questions right now. Peggy, I just want to first start by saying that, holy cow, you brought so much information and very detailed. So thank you for that. But as we get into looking at all these grants that are available for us to apply to, I might have some questions for you or Daryl.
Yes, so I'll send Daryl this thing, and I will also send him, which you're not gonna like, but I'll send him the link to the rules for the American Rescue Plan money. Like I said, they are 149 pages. You don't need to read them all, but but you can read, pieces of them. And that gives you a better idea of how you can use that money to augment this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Mark Beauregard, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Daryl, do you have anything you want to ask or add before we?
I'm all set. I'll confer with Peggy and do a comparison on the SB 170 muni bonds that they have in New Hampshire. Just see what looks the best fit. And I do like what you raised, Peggy, with the consider affordability funds, that we might be able to partner American Rescue Plan with some of the Franklin County money and have a little build out there for the municipalities to do this.
Mark's waving his hand.
Okay, thank you, Daryl. Mark, go ahead.
Yes, I was just wondering if this group of towns need to wait for the interlocal agreement before they seek determination as to whether they're unserved or not. Because
Our
if they,
agreement about how you're going to split the costs doesn't matter to us about whether you're served or unserved. Unserved and unserved is simply a matter of who has service and who doesn't, and what the numbers are.
so once we were certified as being unserved, you'd keep that in your file, and then as grant opportunities came out, we could just apply and we'd have already cleared that hurdle?
Yeah.
So
you
they
would
can
have
apply
to,
for that at any time?
Yeah, I mean, this is, though this has been in our rule for a long time, this is the first time we've used the process, and everybody was caught off surprise by this round. But they won't be caught next time, which means that your area, when I look at even at our map, you're pretty red, which means you're pretty unserved. So you don't have a lot of green. You do in sort of downtown Rangeley, but you don't have a lot of green anywhere else. So I think the ability for this area to be unserved, you're unserved at 25.3, and my guess is you're unserved at 50/10.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I think that's all the questions. I want to thank you very much, Peggy, for being
Welcome.
here. As Rebecca said, this is very informational. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us here. Someday maybe come up in person, we can meet. But again, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And we're going to move
Well,
on.
this is one of the reasons I love Zoom, is because I have a call at 3 o'clock, a national call, which normally I would have to go to that. And so I can do the national call, life is easier with Zoom. It's all I got to say.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peggy.
All right, bye.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have the timeline review. And the other day, I just wanted to share with you the updates that I had made. Then I got looking at the dates and where we were on the calendar, and I said, you know what, I probably ought to make an option B, because we can talk about where we're at the time of this. So I took out the ones we've already passed. I started on May 25th on option A. That's where we're at today. We would have to think about a warrant for a special town meeting. I would have to prepare that. I want to give a first draft of that to my board on their next meeting of the 7th of June. And then there's a town meeting the next day where they'll ask the question of the voters if they want to enter discussion. That's one that's already on the ballot. Dallas is doing the same thing on June 11th. Sandy River, by the way, is doing that on June 26th. And Rangeley Plantation is going to answer that question affirmatively, so that's good news. And then I have plugged in July 28th as a possible date for the follow-up special town meeting referendum vote and for the actual entry of the interlocal cooperation. So that would mean we'd have to work on that document and all the other items that are on the list between now and July 28th. Now, something I want to bring up that I talked about with Kate earlier. So July 28th, we're going to work backwards from there. I don't think I put this into the timeline, but we have to have absentee ballots available prior to at least 30 days. So that puts us back to
You do have it.
June 28th. I did put it in the back to June 28th. That is 2 days after the Sandy River vote. So we can't really prepare a draft document. We know which parties are actually going to be in this.
Still, I think we can assume that everyone's going to be in it, especially I think that Rangeley already happened, but I think you guys feel pretty comfortable that
Well,
this is.
we're not committing to anything.
We're just voting to talk about it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like it's
It's a no-brainer.
particularly important vote. I mean, we're saying, okay, is it okay if we continue discussion?
Absolutely, yes, but that's going to allow us to generate the actual document people are going to vote on the date of July 28th. So
I think that they're saying that we can go ahead and assume that that's going to be a yes, so that I don't think you have to worry about waiting until the June 26th to draft that.
oh no, we want to draft it, but we won't know for sure which towns are going to be on it until June 26th, for sure.
Well, that's.
Well,
what
between now and
for.
then, we need to make a lot more progress in hashing out what we want to see in the interlocal agreement. And secondly, I want to ask you a procedural question. Is the town of Rangeley solely committed to having ballot, vote by ballot? Are all of your referendums mandated to be done by ballot? Can you have an in-person meeting?
The select board can call that. Yeah, they could call that.
That might resolve some of your pressure to get absentee ballots out.
It may. That would be.
I would suggest, maybe you want to toss that around in looking at trying to get this aggressive timeline achieved.
That's a question that we would have to ask the select board. I will say that it is customary for us to vote by referendum.
That's fairly recent.
Yeah, it's customary, so, that's a discussion I can have with them. I don't want to say that that's the only thing in this timeline that concerns me. I think, I wouldn't push for that without knowing that we're going to have everything else ready.
Can I have a clarification question?
Sure.
Does the interlocal agreement have to be completely worked out and understood by June 28th when you put the absentee ballot in place? I think that's kind of what the question is, because if it does, we have to meet on June 27th and have the lawyers approve our interlocal agreement on June 27th.
Yes. Yeah, we need to have something that's ready so that the folks can see what they're actually voting on.
By June 28th, not
Right.
by the
When
time
they
the
pick up their
absentee ballot, they
can see.
would see the thing.
Yeah.
So, that's,
Well, the plantations.
See that in my box, would that be fantastic?
The plantations would post the document 7 days in advance of the vote, and we would do it in person.
yes.
So we're a lot more freed up.
Hmm.
Which might be part of the consideration to call for an in-person vote.
Is Steve still on? Steve, did you hear all that?
He's there.
You're muted.
Muted.
Are you asking, Kate?
Yeah, I was just asking your thoughts on that.
I agree with Joe, but I don't want to say much more than that until the rest of the board weighs in.
Is that something that you can just bring up at a board meeting, or?
Yeah. Yeah, we could.
That's all we're at. That's all we're asking. You can't make any decisions without the board. But
Couldn't hear that.
the plantations would ask that you consider that option.
I have no problem bringing that to the board and asking them after.
The way to do it.
We can do that on June 7th.
That's your
That'd
next
be great.
meeting.
But I just want to make sure with all of you, while we're all here today, that the rest of the timeline works. I don't want to ask them that question unless this timeline works.
I think this timeline works, although I feel like there's additions that need to be made in terms of additional discussions / meetings that need to take place.
Public workshops, I don't disagree with that.
Well, not necessarily public workshops as much as delegate meetings and our sub meetings. One, we need to discuss this, everything we learned today. Two, we need to look, I don't think we can wait till June. When do you have this, we meet with the.
We'll send you Riverside June 20th.
Oh, draft with the legal, review of the interlocal on June 16th. I feel like we need to have a meeting even before then to discuss it.
Well, have we actually discussed all of the details that are going to be in the interlocal agreement? Because as far as I know, they don't exist yet.
Right.
And until they exist, and we've made the decision as to what they are, you can't come up with a draft.
The plantations want representation in what is put forth for a draft proposal. There have been concerns, a number of different issues, and if we could perhaps have a subcommittee task force that could collate what's important to the plantations, discuss it, maybe hash it out, and then put it forward to the attorney so they can look at the best format for a draft agreement. I think we would.
You're thinking things like a seven-member,
All of it, the
How many board members? What's the
representation.
financial allocation? What, all of those things are, those details we need to know. And did we ever get the copies of the other interlocal agreements that your attorney was going to research and provide?
She has not sent those on over to us yet, but we could have those.
Would we have those before June 16th?
I can check.
Well, we have to have, according to this, on June 16th, we're gonna review the interlocal agreement draft. So we will have to just answer all the questions that Linda's raising, as well as see.
Right, so I just want to be very clear, this is a framework of how I kind of envision this break August 2nd. This is not a promise that any of this is going to be able to happen.
right,
No,
but let's say June 16th is, the draft is done. So what everybody's kind of saying, how I'm hearing it, is there's work to be done prior to June 16th to get a real draft out to us and give the lawyers time to get a real draft. So we need to add a few more steps in here. And the best way to approach it might be some sort of a smaller committee who can just meet,
Right.
And then come back to a delegate meeting that we schedule halfway in between before June 16th.
I just want to
Does that
pause.
make,
Yep, that does.
Okay.
I like the idea of the subcommittee. I think it's a great idea. We should talk about that in a minute. I just want to pause for a second and just point out that August 2nd is the deadline for Monday. So that is what we're working backwards from. All of these things must be done in time to apply for that.
Oh, we're
That's
well
right.
aware.
Okay.
That's why we think these other meetings need to happen.
I have looked into the agreements, the interlocal agreements for broadband with Secretary of State's office. I have spoken with Baileyville, Calais. I'm very familiar with the Katahdin broadband. They are intrinsically different from what we're looking at because they are owner operated, generating revenues. The CCI proposal has us looking at conduit financing through the bonds where they are responsible to pay principal and interest. So if we want to ask these other two groups who have offered their assistance for their interlocal agreements, we can certainly look at them. But I think we really need to focus on our specific needs for our communities and our perspectives. Carrie's got some very specific concerns that are recurring. I know Sandy River has their concerns, Dallas, theirs. And then you've got the town of Rangeley. We're never gonna come to an agreement if we can't review, discuss, and agree on the important items. And I think that if we could meet before some of these deadlines, we could achieve that.
So maybe we go forward, say, Joe, yes, let's do a subcommittee.
Mhm.
You meet and organize, and Linda is in charge. Or whatever, I mean, I don't wanna answer, but these are 2, 3 of the plantations and Carrie's on the phone, it's not up to me, it's up to you guys, all 4, is that?
So now that we've gone through option A, do you even want to talk about option B at all?
Well, until
Well,
we
we have-
really figure out the financing, how can we determine which of these options works? I mean, if, in light of what Peggy said, that one area did with private bank financing, is there some rule or stipulation that we have to do it by bond, that we couldn't potentially get the money from a bank where we could buy it down as we applied for grants over time for our broadband? I mean, money for broadband is gonna continue to be available for a while. And once we're locked into a bond, we're not gonna be able to use that money.
I think there are different components. This is a complex situation with 4 different municipalities. We have the interlocal agreement, then we have the financing. I believe that there are commercial banks that do deal in municipal bonds. There's one in Boston. I don't have any experience with them. I don't think any of us do. That's another question to look at. The more research I do on conduit financing through a bond process, it is my understanding from what I read, and I'm trying to get it confirmed, that you can purchase bond insurance. That would alleviate the risk that we perceive should there be a default. That is our primary concern over a 20-year period. The plantations do not know how to cover that. We've never entered into a bond agreement for conduit financing. So that is a major obstacle, and us saying, okay, this looks like a good deal. Let's proceed to bond. So if we could have some committees that really take charge and communicate to everyone involved and get some of these answers and concerns out on the table by someone who is qualified to answer them, I think we'd make better progress, because they're 2 very real concerns. What Joanne's talking about, as far as the money is a very real concern. And we're very different than the town of Rangeley with your TIF. And I understand the TIF, I know there's no money in it, but you can allocate funds over the years towards broadband. If we're looking at a default situation without knowing whether or not we could become liable for payments, we have to come up with a different scheme.
Right, I agree with that, and I think as we discuss this, it becomes more clear to me that, the August 2nd deadline is imposed upon us by the bond bank. That's what's giving us, the sense of urgency, not that it's not urgent, we want broadband, but that's what is making it so pushed so hard, is that August 2nd deadline.
option B says, okay, now you have until the next bond bank application deadline, and you can look at bank funding, you can look at grants.
On option B, my only concern is, she just mentioned it, the risk. The risk is, there's 10 million projects going on.
Right.
Consolidated will have now put us way back on a
Right.
thing. We are now gonna be competing against more projects. And if the longer we wait, the worse it is, the higher the risk, that we will go now, instead of a 12 to 18 month implementation, it's a 2 to 3 or 4 year implementation. So that's my concern with any pushback. I understand how August 2nd is a nightmare. But I also agree with Linda, where if we start separating and working really hard and get some of this stuff done, we can get some real answers and have some things in place. And if we still can't do August 2nd, then we can't, but we've done everything we could to try
Okay,
to get, that's my
all right.
2 cents.
Are we it for getting the answers?
Yeah.
What is Daryl's part?
Oh, no, Daryl, that would be up to Joe.
Yeah, he can work with us. So we've this has been a great discussion. I want to answer what we do with subcommittees. I'm just pointing out that we've gone an hour and a quarter, and I don't want folks to lose steam.
Well, it's gonna take hours to get this done. You can't just have meetings that are 15, 20 minutes and think we're gonna have an interlocal agreement.
So do we?
Well, we should schedule.
Yeah, that's what I'm just gonna say. Can we schedule something for next week?
As long as we have some tasks
That was.
that
gonna
are
be my next comment.
signed
Yep.
with a deadline.
So why don't, if you don't mind, list out the tasks, we'll write them down, we'll formulate an agenda. So one of them is a question about answering bond versus bank funding. Rebecca, did you hear that conversation about can a bank fund something like this as opposed to a bond bank? She's on the
Community
phone.
reinvestment loans, I think is what she
Yeah.
calls it.
Yeah, she's on the phone, but I'm gonna talk with Rebecca about that, so that's where that's gonna be assigned. Do you have any other tasks you want on the agenda?
Yeah, we want to find out if we can purchase bond insurance for conduit financing.
Okay, are you gonna answer that question?
I have an appointment to speak with a bond counsel.
Okay.
On Friday,
Very good.
and I'm also speaking with some broadband consultants in Boston.
Okay. So I have bank funding, I have bond insurance, and Linda's gonna spearhead that.
So how about
Rebecca is doing the bond versus bank.
Yep, Rebecca's gonna do the bond versus bank.
And then how about the discussions on the interlocal, get a draft,
Rough drafts.
We need to have the concerns of each of the plantations put forward and someone to receive them.
on the interlocal agreement.
Well, who's the contact person?
How about Kate?
Fine with me.
Okay, Kate's gonna handle that. And will you reach out to each municipality, each community, and
I'm gonna reach out right now. I need all of your input, and if we're meeting next week, then I would like at least by Friday, if you could give me a list. If you have more afterwards, you're free to give me more. My email is tgingerbread@aol.com.
And this is for the interlocal agreement.
Agreements, so things that you want representation and how you want to see things divided in for your plantation, specific plantation. And then I think after that, we would need to have another meeting just to make sure that it's, can I call the lawyer? Or should I not do that? Cause that's a charge, that's a fee,
I would
okay.
have to coordinate that for you.
Cause if I can get the rough drafts by Friday,
Okay.
that would be good.
The following Friday.
When
No,
will
this
we
Friday.
get- When will we get them?
I think we need to keep
You know, the copies
communicating
of the ones
via
that she's
email
already-
so we can have inputs. So we're not waiting till the next meeting and maybe getting information, maybe not, that is in front of everybody at the same time, so we can have advanced.
So things to consider are how many people, the representation, how you wanna see it distributed. Is it 5 people, 7 people, 9 people, whatever?
Also, terms of service, you know, are they gonna be one-year terms because you're gonna be voting these people from your communities each year?
Okay.
Things like that.
All right, so we've got the interlocal agreement, reach out or outreach, that's gonna be Kate, rough drafts, I've got a note to get those from
Once you
our
get them,
attorney.
you'll get them.
You have Carrie's email? Yes.
Okay, any other action items for the next agenda?
I have a question.
Okay.
Have we been in contact with Consolidated to see what the turnaround time would be on an actual Rangeley contract, not a sample contract from New Hampshire?
Are you willing and able to do that by the next meeting?
I can, but I mean, somebody else could step up.
All right, anybody else wanna do that? Do you wanna do that?
Who do you contact?
Jeff here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll contact Jeff.
All right,
And I'm asking him for an actual Rangeley deal, what our deal.
Yeah, and what their timeline is, what do they need from us to start working on a contract? Because initially, when we had, back in December, the first two meetings when Jeff and some of the engineers from CCI attended, there were a number of questions that came up and they were answered pretty succinctly that, yeah, if we went to contract or, you know, we were getting close to that, they would come back in and reassess. They gave us a very broad answer based on the SUO mapping and data that was requested.
No, they got their information from Consolidated themselves, they didn't get it from the school.
Okay, but their request it was an informal request by Franklin County Development Council. And we've not firmed up any other details since that was submitted to Charlie last June. So just
I'm glad.
push them along and ask.
The RFP is what we're working off of, right? So they answered the RFP, which is basically the rough draft of the, that we need to start working on for contract negotiations. So we need to go through that and determine what are in question and what we want to see happen at the end. Peggy mentioned.
Well, we actually have to see a contract. We've never seen a contract.
Yeah. I mean, I know in speaking with Jeff, he said, you know, they have been in negotiations with towns for up to 3 years. So I don't believe that they see us at this point in time as being any different because we don't have our interlocal agreement, we don't have our financing. I believe now is the time to push to ask for, what do you need from us? And these are our deadlines. Can you meet that? See what he says?
Can he meet our deadlines?
Yeah.
I do have one last question, Joe. I know you're trying to wrap this up. It's, you're going to present the warrant article to Rangeley, right, for the 27th?
right.
Which is a special town meeting referendum vote. And basically you just wrote interlocal corporation, go into that agreement. Isn't it two, am I mistaken, is it two questions? Is it go into an interlocal agreement? And do you also want to contract with Consolidated? Or is it one, just interlocal, and then the town just does not vote about going into negotiations
So
with Consolidated?
once you join an interlocal, once you create an interlocal corporation, that is the entity that formally negotiates and contracts with CCI and applies to the bond bank.
So they
But
don't need to.
we don't
know
need
until-
We don't need a vote by the public, is what you're saying.
So
I believe if it involves public funds, you would need a vote. And that is not an answer we have.
I don't know.
Right, so the interlocal corporation is gonna have the authority to do that. That's a good question, though. There may be a process involved in them applying for the bond bank that needs to be plugged into that.
We need to understand the risk and what it's gonna mean, and if it results in raising funds through taxpayer dollars, I do believe that we're gonna need a separate vote. Because they're not gonna just say, go ahead, we trust you guys.
Yeah, you can do an agreement corporation, you can do whatever you want.
No, I don't think so.
So I do believe it's.
So, I would think, does it,
Two-part question.
yeah, if you're gonna apply for a bond now, remember, it's the corporation that applies for the bond. That's a question we'll have to get answered.
Yeah, but we have to relay that to the folks who are voting on this.
Right. And does that mean we have to have a special town meeting too?
Mm.
Oh, that'll set them off.
Yeah,
It's another thing to consider, though. I mean, you need to be aware that there will need to be another special.
you're gonna have to have a
That's also
special town
another
meeting
reason
no
why
matter
this
what, though.
meeting
Yeah,
might
right,
make
we-
more sense being not a vote. Might make sense for even Rangeley to have it as a, not just a ballot. Because it's so complicated,
Like-
it's potentially complicated, right?
Yes,
And you want the people to be able to say, so wait, are you saying that you're gonna be going for whatever?
We would have a public hearing.
We would, but what I'm saying is that it's another reason why they might wanna be at a public meeting
Exactly.
instead of.
And because our votes are in person, if someone will move to accept it, then we open discussion on the
Right.
floor. And somebody may make a motion to amend what's been proposed. So that we can work through it.
Right.
Okay, any other action items for next week? The next thing, if there are no other action items, is to pick the date and time. And I do not have my book with me. I know we just set up a negotiations meeting with Steve and I next week. I think it's at 3, Steve, on Wednesday, is that right? I'm gonna go
Is
get
that
my-
relevant to broadband?
Well, it's relevant if we're gonna be in the same room with you. We
No,
can't be
no,
in two
the
places.
negotiations part.
No, that's a different-
It's something else.
but today's Tuesday, correct?
Yes, next week's June.
Yeah,
Oh, God.
I know.
So Tuesday is June 1st.
Yes.
Okay.
The day
So
to the holiday.
Tuesday,
We
June
usually do
1st
it
at 2?
Wednesdays, don't we?
Today, Tuesday.
Today is Tuesday.
Okay.
Are we changing them to Tuesdays?
I didn't think so, that's why.
Oh, okay.
I had mentioned Wednesday.
It doesn't matter to me.
Wednesday?
So
Go ahead.
what's the Wednesday?
Steve, do you have any thoughts on Wednesday next week at 2?
Next week is fine. Tuesdays are gonna be out from me from this point forward. I'm sorry. But that doesn't mean you guys don't meet. Just I can't do it on Tuesdays.
Wednesday.
June 1st, we have Union, Joe. I think I heard you mention that. I apologize. The clarity for communication today for me is not good. So I'm having a hard time hearing the round robin. I'm sure it's been good, just I haven't been able to grasp all of the content. I'm sorry, Kate. I know you asked me a question and I don't think I got it right, but next meeting is when you say June 1st?
No, June 2nd.
June 2nd at 2 PM.
June 2nd I can do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
What about Carrie?
Carrie Keep, are you available June 2nd at 2 PM, sir? He's still there and he's not muted. I don't know what's going on.
He's muted. I see on my screen.
How about now? You hear me now?
There you go.
I
Carrie,
can't hardly understand. I can hear Steve perfectly, but you guys in the hall, it's echoey. I don't know if you need microphone, something. The audio is terrible.
okay, we'll work on that.
It is difficult, Joe. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Can I ask a question about meetings? They're not being posted on your calendar for town of Rangeley.
Okay,
Shouldn't they be?
they probably should be, yeah. It's probably something that was overlooked. Are they posted on your website?
They're in our minutes
No.
that are posted.
I'll make it up.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I have to leave. Thank you all.
Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
Bye. So Wednesday at 2.
Cool.
Yeah, one other thing on that point, speaking of calendars and websites, can somebody from this group take minutes of these meetings? Because I haven't been doing that. I didn't think they would go this long, so if somebody can volunteer to do that for me, that would be helpful.
Don't
Is there any
you
Rangeley
post,
staff?
don't you
We're all
post to the
volunteers.
Zoom?
Well, I don't know if you need the minutes, because you have them recorded, and the recordings, if the recordings are on
Yeah.
on the website, then you can just refer to the recordings.
Yeah,
I mean, that's one part of having a meeting, right, you're recording it, so.
Works for me.
Yeah, because we're not an official, like our committee is, where we have to keep minutes.
I believe that the recording of the Zoom is sufficient. However, as Joanne said, Town of Rangeley's got the staff. We're all elected or volunteers, so.
Okay. Any other business?
That's plenty.
Good, thank you.